We all know we're recording now.
Recording in progress.
All right, cool. All right. Welcome to the Lost End podcast. Today we have with us Kai. Kai, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do? Because it's too complex and I don't know you well enough to say all the things that you are all about, and I don't want to defame you in any way.
I appreciate the austerity toward defamation. That's great. So yeah, my name is Kai McGinnis. I'm an entrepreneur, a facilitator, a coach, consultant, student, you name it. There's quite a lot of hats depending on what the weather is on the day. But for me, my personal journey, I like to say, has really been a lot of putting roots down, going from the ground up, from the inside out, and applying that to life, business, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional realms, the relationship realm, all of that. And throughout that, I've been a collegiate athlete. I've been an entrepreneur for the past decade or so as well. And yeah, like I mentioned, several hats in between there. So this season of my life is more about shifting into a bit more of vulnerable offerings of space and guidance and walking alongside other people in a more authentic way.
Before we get into the experiences that have changed you, like a little bit like how you grew up and who you were like spiritually and like what your belief system was like when you were a youth.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good question. Some of that nuance I haven't necessarily maybe shared as much about regarding quote unquote where I come from, but grew up with most of, say, one or two small branches of the family. Pretty much all of my family heritage being in southeastern Ohio and in general the Appalachia, Hocking Hills area, and grew up in an environment that wasn't necessarily the most outside the box. There are a lot of values and virtues of that simple living, maybe even more so back then than modern day, but it's weird to say that at 27. So asterisk. I grew up as a super high functioning kid to the point that it was not necessarily advantageous at times. And I grew up in an environment where it felt so out of place that in many ways that, you kind of are convinced that because it doesn't necessarily compute, that it's really easy to adopt the perspective that you're what's wrong with the equation.
Yeah. Sure.
And I spent a lot of my time, I think, wanting to break out of that mold. I grew up, so academics always came really naturally. I was one of those kids that never studied for anything ever, and did fine. And studying for me was like flipping through the chapter for 15 minutes before class. Yeah. And so I remember though being a kid and like there was this kid in my first grade class. Won't say his name. Still remember it shockingly, but he was like the quarterback on the football team. And I remember this kid was a teacher's son. He got up and he like pulled his pants down in front of the class. But 2 days later, he was on the football field throwing a ball 30 yards and scoring touchdowns. And he was like, worshipped for all intents and purposes. And I remember that being like the first time where like it just did not compute. Like the social structure and the stage of where I was at. And so I really, though, channeled a lot of that drive toward athletics because it was a challenge for me. It was something that didn't come as naturally. That physical expression took a lot more work. And so that was the outlet that really, I think, changed the directory for me. And that resulted in me going to, the University of Indianapolis. And I was of the mind that like if I could do the athletics and the academics well, that I could like quote unquote get out and I could have a choice to go somewhere. So I wanted to go to a city, and I chose Indianapolis. And then I didn't live with an American for like 2.5 years.
Nice.
Yeah, the difference in that versus baseball culture was at least in the Midwest, right? There was a big change for that. It opened my perspective up. I have done quite a bit of maybe a circle in terms of belief. I grew up in the church, but grew up in like my parents weren't married. I spent most of the time at my mom and my stepdad's. They married when I was like a year old, and bounced around from a few churches, a few different denominations, yada yada. And I had those experiences, like
as a kid, you bounced around, or just as when you got older and like had more freedom, or was it part of your family?
Sorry, it's just part of the family and moving.
Okay.
And different things. So, did that as a kid, and then things happen as a teenager. Shit gets tough. Kind of drifted away from that. And I went on a very circuitous path, I guess, of wanting to set out and find my own way. I was on this path of like self-development and those things, and kind of in that gap in between. So this is like teenage years. Shit's hard, socially and environmentally, and started like Eric Thomas, Les Brown, Paulo Coelho, like some of the greats, I guess, on the shift in the mindset. And that kind of started that process. And then after my freshman year of college, maybe my sophomore year, I had the opportunity to take psychedelics for the first time. And I sat with psilocybin outside on a summer day with a couple of my teammates. And I went through the 10 years of therapy compressed into 6 hours experience.
Yeah.
Cried 7 times, felt the wonder of the world, like just that childlike awe. Experienced a spate of telepathy in there, which is really interesting.
What? Kind of no. You can't just like can't just stop there. You can't just keep going over. Like all of a sudden I was an X-Man. Like no, like you have to like at least like tell us what you thought.
It was more like just finishing each other's sentences, like, and you understood everything they were going to say. And then it was like having a file cabinet of things ready to put on the table, like 5 sentences, like in different ways that you could go with the conversation. And like when my friend picked one and we were just in this flow state having a conversation and like literally like we were leaning over the top of the car, and just like hanging out. And yeah. And we even like acknowledged in the moment, it's like, whoa, are you doing the same thing? Like, we don't have to like hear the words. He's like, yeah, but I know what you said. Like, and it's like, same. So, that really wasn't one of the main takeaways, honestly.
It's still cool. Like, I still enjoy it. Like, it's still good.
Yeah. It totally is. I was more saying that as it's kind of wild that isn't one of the main takeaways that I had to experience. But it really opened the doors to that perspective, and it felt like just coming home. It felt like I was just fucking here again in a way that I think we just become so disembodied sometimes, often through our day to day and the excess of the world, that we forget what that's like.
Oh, it just gives you a little chance to deconstruct a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So that shifted things. And then as I went through the rest of college, had my shifts with athletics and kind of transitioning out of the program, and starting to find my feet with my own like entrepreneurship and experiences. I've always
was that like a regular thing after you did had your first taste? Was that were you doing that regularly, or just like that was just a once in a while experience that you had?
Yeah, no, I think I didn't partake in another like psychedelic until maybe once again the next summer or the next spring break.
Mm-hmm.
So there were probably only like 3 or 4 experiences in that 2-3 year period between that experience and my first ayahuasca ceremony.
Oh snap!
Gotcha.
I feel like a transition's kicking in there. I think I know where this story's going because he just said the words. Yeah, no. So that was the next thing you did?
Yeah, I mean, if we don't count smoking weed in there, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's in there, but not less stories there unless you start getting telepathy or like grew like X-Men claws from that shit, then I want to know. I smoked weed and I became Iceman and I shot ice. I don't think that happened, but but in case it did, I have to ask. So
Yeah, actually Magneto. Thanks.
There we go.
Uh, yeah, so that was in 2018. Quite a few serendipitous coincidences leading up to that. The experience of sitting with that particular plant medicine has been the biggest pathway open to self-discovery and healing and I guess what you would call inner work of any medium I've experienced. I don't think you can like God itself in that category, right? But in terms of tools and technologies, it has been the most significant one that I've encountered.
I mean, from your place when you first did the mushroom stuff, right? Like, so before that, I guess like you grew up in the church, so were you always kind of comfortable with like there's a heaven and everything's gonna be cool regardless, or did you ever have doubts? Did you ever have like any darkness there? I mean, because like you kind of talked about like going from like small town to Indianapolis, which is not huge, but it's still got to be a big culture shock. And then, like you said, like having like this influence of like somebody like from a different country, like all that had to be big. But like did you ever have any darkness or doubts with that, or did you always find comfort in it that what you grew up believing was the right thing, or did you ever doubt it? Like, did that change like with those experiences? Like,
I think that's a great question. It certainly opens like the gates, and I didn't like to what else is out there and to what these experiences are. I guess I'll back up and go back toward some of those tough times that I mentioned when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Stuff was, I felt like I was like hyper protective of just like, I used to just shell up and like put my head down and truck through because like, and just get to the next space, kind of lone wolf it because that was what was safe. And as a result of that, I was always, I feel like fighting for my place, fighting those around me. Like it was always like indignant, right? It was like, how do you not see me was kind of what that like inner child was really screaming. I think it got to the point where those things spilled over from the athletics fields into the classrooms, and it was just incessant, that it became pounding all the time, emotionally, and mentally, much more so than physically. Like that part wasn't the issue. That probably would have felt a lot better. And I got to a point where I hit I would say like my lowest low in my life. And I was, I think 16 years old. And I remember going through the experience of, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily suicidal, but I remember getting home at the end of the day and I just had no desire or will to keep living. And I sat with that feeling and I opened up my journal, which had sporadic entries about girls in sports and no real substance in there. And I was going to journal. I was in the mindset of putting parting thoughts down. And, my mom actually shared later on in my life that those days my bedroom was above theirs. And she said that nightly she would just pray that she would find me awake in the morning. And I didn't realize perhaps maybe how apparent that was outwardly, but I guess it's your mother. Like they can tell.
Yeah.
In my journal, I had an entry 1 year to the day that was just one line. I have no idea what it was about. And it said, just hold on, things will get better. And I took that moment as the first time that my higher self maybe spoke to me to use that language.
Yeah.
And it was a moment of like, you have the support you need, but no one is coming to save you. Like you have the salvation, but you must pick yourself up off the ground. So I went away. I stayed with my dad instead. And I just needed space. I needed quiet. Fast forward a couple of years and I made it out to Indianapolis and got to be a part of an incredibly competitive program and just kind of start fresh. I still had a lot of that weight, but I felt like made it through that period. And that really started the opportunity to like my time in Indianapolis, those 5 years of school and then the 5 years after in the community, like that really has been like the metamorphic period of my life, where the person I am is exponentially and astronomically different than the person that arrived there.
Yeah, and I can
So,
say from
Yeah.
experience that I appreciate your victory lap as well. Because when people say like 5 years at college, I relate. Yeah, but you carry that darkness kind of with you, but you persevered. But like, and so like, did that experience with the mushrooms like the first time you had some lightness, or like was there something before that that kind of changed that? Did it alter your beliefs, like coming from the church to go and to do something like that?
yeah, I think in the desire to go out into the wilderness, uh, so to speak, I really wanted to see what was out there from a spiritual perspective as well. I went far down the rabbit trails of really, if you name it, at least on a studious level, um, familiarized and studied and even practiced with quite a lot of those, whether that's Hinduism, Buddhism, indigenous cultures, more from a technical perspective, things in Islam, really just exploring the Tao, Zen, Zhuangzi, a lot of Eastern philosophy and text. And I feel
So
like,
that's a pivot from small town Ohio
yeah,
church to
right.
go and to be worldly. I'd say that's pretty huge. Like, especially if that's what drives that, right?
Yeah,
Certainly. Go ahead, Joel.
you share a lot of experiences that I felt when I was a kid growing up too, like feeling sort of like uh masked away, or like your mask was off and everybody else kind of had theirs on, and you just needed to get out of that environment you were surrounded by. And then you find later new experiences, new spiritual connections through just like learning outside of the box that you were raised in, so to speak.
For sure. And had, experiences and of what you'd call Zen or witnessing God and spirit and many of those things through a lot of those outlets. So, I a metaphor I actually used with someone pretty recently. We were talking about beliefs and connecting, seeing God, being connected to spirit. And I was like, well, if you had a camera and you pointed it at a tree and you just had a lens that was slightly off and you took a photo of it and you handed it to me, I would still know that's a tree. And that was basically how I put applying different belief systems to trying to witness God. Like they're different perspectives. Some of them might be out of focus a little bit, but at the end of the day, there is something there that you're able to witness. And I think for each person and their path, it's about the degree and the method and the the lens and the frame that makes sense for them. A couple years after, there was a lot of physical transformation that took place in my life at that point. Actually, when I got to college after my first semester, my coach told me, "quote You need to get more athletic or transfer."
Wow.
Which was really harsh, but it really had the right effect. He was also totally right. So he's like, "You're not bad at the skills, but you're not athletic." So I walked in the weight room and was like, "Hey, strength coach, the football guys are the biggest, fastest, strongest guys here. So give me their programs." And I just started hammering away at that. And then it became definitely not a weak facet of my life and personality. And then that sparked a whole bunch of more just like conscious eating choices and diet. And I went full circle, fell down the dark death hole that is veganism and plant-based eating. No disrespect, but a little bit, because that's just not the nutrient profile that we need as humans in our bodies. I think there's all the spiritual vibrational nuance of food and energetic attachments of food like Ayurvedic. I totally resonate and hear all that. Pound for pound, ounce for ounce, beef liver is the most nutrient dense food on the earth. So like,
I'm with you 100% on that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So if you see the coyote down an animal in the field, right, what's the first thing they eat? The organs. It's just nature. Like they know that. So anyway, that's a whole other thing I could go down. But
Yeah, I
really,
watched that Alone show, and that's where I learned things. I think every time Joel and I talk, we just find that everything I know is from like watching some reality show. Like, so I'm kind of a dumbass. I'm aware. It's fine.
No.
the ability, if true, the ability to admit you're a dumbass makes you smarter than a lot of folk.
Success.
So in this path, was still really developing a lot of the mindset and cultivating, expanding the perspective through different texts and practices, etc. And I was a trainer at the YMCA, and this old man would come to the Y every day and do the same like calisthenics and routine. And he would read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
That book changed my life in 2003.
Fair to say, me too. Because after about 2 weeks of that guy coming up in there every day, I finally walked up to him and I said, "Hey, old man," something along the lines of like, "Normal people don't read that book and you bring it here every day. So who are you?" And we hit off this friendship. And a couple months later, he came up to me and actually had separately, out of respect for privacy and communication, separately had gone to like the closest friend that I had in that gym sphere at the time and had asked him as well. But he came up and approached me a couple months later and said, "Hey, we had a couple back out because of a scheduling conflict. And you're who I feel called to ask. Have you ever thought about sitting with ayahuasca?" I had to go do some research. I had heard of it and like was familiar, but wasn't, like hadn't done a deep dive. Like I'm the kid that like read 10 hours of literature before he smoked a joint.
Being super careful.
Yeah. Aim to be intentional. So I agreed, and I didn't quite know what to expect, but there's folks and buckets and quite an experience.
Was this local, or did you go somewhere for this?
That was my next thing. So it was stateside,
Okay.
but we sat with a fifth generation shaman from Peru.
Hell yeah.
Oh man,
So
That's awesome.
lifetimes of the medicine work. That experience was, for me, it was a lot about my relationship with the feminine and particularly my own mother. We like pulled a card before, and the card was even Tears of the Mother. Our relationship was really fractured. I was the one that she had to fight for, that she had to fight to keep, that she had to fight to raise. And
when you say pulled a card, what can you elaborate?
yeah, you got to
on
tell
that
us
a
like
little bit?
how this works. You just like, and I met a shaman and I did some shit. Like what?
there's like a deck of cards, like like tarot cards.
Tarot
Like
cards. Okay.
yeah. So
Are you
just
in an
those.
apartment? Are you like? I mean, what is the stage here? I need to know. Like, what does it look like? I mean,
Yeah,
is it a?
some private lands. We did one inside of someone's living space, kind of like an open backspace. And then the second ceremony, the following summer that I sat with that shaman, was in a bar on some like open fields around like really beautiful land as well. That experience was all about my relationship with her. And that old man, his name is Wendell, had actually such an old man name. Wendell had shared an experience with, he'd had a falling out with this woman that also happened to be one of my mentors and people in the community that was also, a generation or two older than me. And he shared this makeup story, and there was this Pacific Island phrase, "Aho pono pono." And one of the translations offered is, "I love you. I am sorry. Forgive me. I have forgiven you." And he shared that experience and that with her, with me in the days leading up to the ceremony or sometime in between the conversation and the ceremony. And it really stuck with me because I really looked up to and loved both of those people. So in the ceremony, I had a few visions. Every cup for every person every time is different, and the medicine might not serve you what you want. You might not get the visuals you go in with expectations of, but she will give you what you need. It has that grandmother energy about it. It is there to care for you. And toward the end, I'm finally releasing this pain that I have of this fractured relationship. And despite all that advocacy and that fighting for me, there also was a lot of friction because I was just in a lot of pain in my teenage years, especially. And so that night I prayed out into the ether at the end of the ceremony. I'm finally purging and like letting these things go physically. They actually call it getting well, not getting sick, because the sickness is what's leaving me.
Love that.
Yeah. And so in the midst of purging, letting these things go, I prayed this out to my mother and the translation. And I remember waking up the next morning and feeling lighter. This whole shell had dropped off of me. It was like the same I'm here-ness as like the mushroom, in a way, but like that I'd also been like reoriented, realigned, and felt 20 pounds lighter. And my mom called me the next day and she said, "Hey, son, you were in my dream last night and you were apologizing to me. And you don't need to be sorry. There's nothing for me to forgive you for. And I will always love you."
Well, that's amazing. So you literally were in her dreams.
Was that was part of your experience almost? Like, was that, I mean, did it feel like, I mean, obviously it sounds super related, like that
It's where, I mean, it's phrase for phrase, it's line for line.
Yeah. So crossover there. Yeah, that's amazing.
And that didn't magically fix everything overnight, but it provided a clearing to do that.
What did you feel like that was? I mean, do you feel like, how did it make you feel like how that got there to her? Like, what's that path, right? Like,
I don't know. I have to attribute that to God, to spirit, to things beyond my understanding. I know that I spoke from my spirit and my heart, and I know that she heard me. You know, our body exists here in 3 dimensions. We can't mathematically disprove less than 11. So I think there's a whole bunch of shit in between that we don't necessarily understand. But
I love that.
I think you're getting into semantics, right? We talk about heaven, the spiritual realm, the spirit world, right? If you look back through history and literature and lore, the 4th dimension, like the 5th dimension, you call it what you want, right? Like some of those things I think surely have some interrelatedness, if not acknowledging the same thing in some spots. So,
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, there's like truth in everything. It's just like the interpretation and finding which part of that is. I know that because some people like try and put more science behind it than maybe needs to be. Because I think science is also what kind of like ruins a lot of things that are spiritual, right? Like, good for us in most things, but like we can't explain it all away. So
we've heard lots about the spirit molecule allowing you to pass through to the different dimensions and being able to essentially connect with astral projection lucidly and touch dreams and like being able to like speak to people, find them in dreams and things like that. At least I've heard lots about that. So just to hear you validate that to me is like super affirming and amazing, dude.
Well, yeah, you're more, educated, I think, in theory on this than I am. I just have my anecdotal experience.
So.
I haven't even done it. So
yeah, did that change you though? I mean, I guess like, I guess I was assuming because you're like, as I read, 100 things before I smoked a joint, but then you did this and you probably researched it before. But after that, are you not that anymore? So you had this experience and like you didn't do the homework on it because you lived it and you were good. And you didn't try and like go and justify it by like researching what happened. And I was going off of like, I read 20 things to smoke a joint. And then for this thing, I just lived it. And that's
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think have gotten more into the just living it and learning after experience of late. I used to, I wouldn't say I'm less analytical. I think I just hesitate a lot less.
No, so, that's good.
Yeah. So that really shifted things. And, I stayed then on the work, like with the medicine and plant medicine, specifically psilocybin and ayahuasca have been incredible tools. Set and setting, super important. And I think being intentional about, going in, not necessarily being controlling or like of your expectations. A lot of it, in fact, is right, like letting the expectations go. But to have intentions, I think, and to be intentional with it, because they're really powerful. Anything that allows you to move the needle that substantially in a short amount of time, I'm for. It's part of the reason it's a more macro scale of the same way I feel about like 5-minute wins in life. A little breath work, a 5-minute meditation, an ice bath, a stretch, like a cup of bone broth. Like there are 5-minute things you can do that like fundamentally set you up.
That bone broth is so good.
What? I don't know what that is.
Oh,
it's just bones boiled in water.
Yeah.
And then, but tons of collagen, tons of protein.
Base of pho. If you ever tried that soup.
So you do the breath work and ice bath as well? Is that part of your routine now, or?
Yeah, more or less. It's definitely when I'm not on the road. But definitely part of at least the ice bath portion, but consistent part of practice. Yeah. breath works, yoga, just more mindful movement in general. I used to weightlift all the time, but really just finding a routine of like fluidity and motion and pushing it. Did some bouldering for the last like 18 months or so. Play a lot of soccer. Headed to go play tonight. A couple days ago, I climbed the flat iron in one of the flat irons in Boulder.
Yes.
Barefoot up the side of the mountain.
Dude, that's awesome.
Not for the faint of heart, but trying to be intentional with those things, and just honoring your own rhythm and pace. And those things that work for you. Some people, might get an incredible experience out of yoga, and some people might get an incredible experience out of a 30-minute run. I think it's just honoring where your body is and where you want to be, and meeting yourself where your feet are.
So after that first experience, like, where did that take you? I mean, obviously, I think that was big for you. And I mean, if did all these changes in like how you lived come from that, like, kind of took you more on that journey?
Yes, that really, a lot of the development of those things and the tools and even like the dietary shifts, those things kind of came in between the first ceremony and last summer. In between that was like a really huge metamorphosis of who I am. Eric, you probably don't know this, but I even changed my name a couple of years ago. So Kai is not my birth name. Kai is chosen. I was looking for my artist name and came across this in some Eastern text and under the construct of ikigai, and the root words being iki and kai. And that's basically acts of labor done in love and the fruits of the spirit, the good fruits of that labor that are meant to be shared are iki and kai. The translation of the tribe's name that the shaman from Peru is from translates to the same definition of that same working love. And so when I found this and through this concept, and it was such a simple, it was like, oh, this is my spirit's name. This is who I am. Everything that I've aimed to sculpt and structure my life around in those days since and in that period has been to sow and reap and harvest and share that fruit.
Yeah, and every religion has like some sort of rebirth ritual. That was just, yours was just different than others, right?
That's amazing, knowing that you had changed your name and hearing your explanation of why and what it means now is amazing, dude. Yeah, mad respect.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing more on that and being more open about that. Not that I'm not open, I just necessarily didn't just put it out there a ton.
Yeah.
It's a big enough shift. So, but it's really interesting. It doesn't even like the old one doesn't even resonate. It'd be like if I invited you over for dinner and you knocked on the mailbox. Like the mail's still going to show up, but it's not the same. In regards to like when I hear my old name and that and the integration of that, and even like my father coming around, like small town blue collar worker, like getting to a point where he respected it and honors it, and the shift has been made there is really cool. That was something he did not respond kindly to it at first, and for a year or two, like I gave up, kind of just had let that go. It was like, oh, that'll never happen. Surmounted that courage to have that conversation with him, and made that commitment to myself. And I told him, actually, pretty deep story with that. One of his sisters passed away after a lot of health complications, and went to spread her ashes at the same cemetery where his parents are buried. And in that moment and having those conversations and some family in town that we hadn't seen in years. After that, before we left, I asked to speak to him, and I shared with him there in front of his father and my grandfather's grave. And I said, hey, I know that this is what you know me as and knew me as, and I know this may not be what, you might not understand, but my tombstone will say Kai. And I would rather you get to know me for the man I am for the next 25 years of your life than to try and meet a kid that's not there. that you've known for the last 25.
Respect.
And this man, God love him, goes, well, son, it's just like I tell her, points to his wife. It's like, tell her all the time, I can't read your mind. You got to tell me these things. It's like, oh, God bless you, man. Like, you couldn't tell that it bothered me. Like, it was just funny. That's been really good practice, showing up and just communicating and like, honoring that masculinity of where you're at and your truth and speaking it. And that has been, I feel like there's levels. There's learning something, right? And then there's conceptually understanding it. Then there's practicing it. And then there's like true embodiment. And we go through those layers and those cycles with each thing. And the last year or so has really been embodiment for me.
I would feel bad if I didn't say that when your dad said, I can't read your mind, that you didn't offer him mushrooms and be like, want a bet? Boom. See, tie that back to the earlier conversation. And then open your dad's mind. Your dad's going to change his name.
It's time to take dad to the sweat lodge.
Yeah.
For a round of psilocybin.
So Eric, you'll like this. So out on the farmland, there are a few ponds, and I chopped one open with an axe this winter and got in it. And I was like, Dad, you getting in the ice? He looks at me and he's something like, fuck no. You got a better chance of seeing God than you do me in that ice. And I looked at my father without hesitation. I said, well, I've already seen God, so are you getting in this fucking ice or not?
Hell yeah.
Still didn't do it?
He did not get in, but
okay.
We're working on it. My mom took her first ice bath with me a couple months ago.
I saw that. That's amazing.
That was amazing. So I've had the opportunity to host a few retreats this year, and some experiences co-facilitating with mushroom and sound baths. So like sound guided journeys and holding space for others. Will say I'm still much more closer to Sherpa than Shaman, but am, showing up for others and offering opportunities to go on journeys of healing and self-discovery is a massive part of it. And to take a step back and kind of reorient my life over these past few months, several months, was an acknowledgement that, with all due respect to the other things that I've worked on and the business that I've spent most of my time helping build over the last 5 years, there's nothing that anyone could ever achieve in that space that I could facilitate that would ever be as meaningful to me as one person having the opportunity to sit with one of these medicines.
Yeah, and you stick with like the ayahuasca and the mushroom stuff because that's the natural stuff, or have you reached out beyond that, or is those just the things that have worked for you?
Yeah, I've had some other experiences, LSD, MDMA combo, which is a frog medicine. It's like a very purging, short, intense,
interesting
experience. Yeah, that's part of what I experienced in Costa Rica, and then I have a friend back here in Indianapolis that is a certified practitioner with that too. He's since moved to Florida, so I had another session when I came back after Costa Rica last year.
We don't have enough time today with all the things that you've experienced. That's I don't know. We
didn't even talk about the sweat lodge yet. It's all a part of it, man. They've all been really powerful tools. The mushroom and the ayahuasca, I think, is rooted for me. Yes, because it's the natural stuff, because it's that connected consciousness, that Gaia, that's the Gaia Kai, that natural connected nature of things. Yes, has been the most profound. There are other ones, but there are other tools, right? To each their own. But for me, those are like hammer and wrench.
That's the one I really want to try. Ayahuasca. Yeah. Connecting with the earth and communion with nature.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I have taken that step forward into Sherpaing a group. My first group won't be the last, I don't believe, because at this point in my journey, it feels like the opportunity that I've had to sit with the medicine and the work that I've had, and it's provided so much for me that it would feel disingenuous to not share. I've never been someone that in a worldly sense has ever really naturally fell into being a follower. That doesn't mean I'm not okay doing the labor and doing the work and being a part of the team. I fucking love that. And it's not something where I'm not afraid to go first.
Well, what does that experience mean when you're leading those? What actually do you do? Like, what's your role in that? I guess, like, again, set me up. Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah. So, a large part of it is calling in, connecting the group, making sure that that energy is right, that the expectations are clear, that it's honored in the way that it's meant to be. So there's preparation, the diet, and being very intentional about that. So you're basically just phasing out substances, overconsumption, processed foods, and you gradually retract those. Alcohol being a huge one. Um, Spicy foods, pork, heavy stuff, processed foods, sugar, artificial sugars, added sugars like caffeine, nicotine. You usually cut all those things leading up to it, so you're in a clean state and your gut is settled. So you're in a space to receive the medicine, specifically with ayahuasca. So a big part of it is setting up mentally and physically going in with the group, and offering us being connected as a group, starting to get the energy together, drop in, doing weekly calls. And then basically, if someone's like, oh, what am I paying for? Well, in addition to, all of it, tough to put into words, but the peace of mind between plane trips. So we're going to go have the opportunity to drop into, the heart of Mother Nature, to have 7 days together in brotherhood and sisterhood eventually, to share and to get clear and to realign and reroute and drop in and come home to ourselves. That's really what it's about.
So do you do different things when you're there? Like, I mean, do you is it just, it's not just that ceremony, like you said, like you have to do like a cleanse before you get there. There's that piece, but then there's also probably communication and like you're there's like, I mean, like I almost say group therapy because it's probably bigger than that, but like, do you do other things like the sweat lodges or anything like that while you're there? Is it like a whole system or how does that work?
Yeah, so it is like a whole thing there. There's a whole flow through the week. So there's a couple nights of the ayahuasca ceremonies. There's a day where we'll do the combo, usually pretty early in the week. We'll have a sound bath experience. We'll have a day where we'll do the sweat lodge and those things, those medicines, that's a lot of work. That's like pretty much what you do for the day. You do that and we hang out and integrate, eat real, incredible, so much good fruit and organic food. Some good daily movement or breathwork practices, just like get the group dropped in together in the morning and get back in the flow, is good. We'll hike the Diamante Mountain and we'll actually stay under the waterfall one night.
Hell yeah.
So camping under a waterfall is part of that too. And then, we'll hit the beach. We'll have some time to drop in to get to explore nature and go on a couple hikes. And ultimately, though, it's just about forging those bonds with ourselves, with nature, with one another. And because they say, like life is the ceremony. The real work starts, quote unquote, when you go home. So there's an integration process before and after. And so my job is to make sure that my role with that is to make sure that everyone is in the best state they can be going in and being there as support for them, because stuff's going to come up. That's the whole point, stuff's going to come up and you're going to clear it and move through it. And
it sounds very physical. Like, I mean, not just the hikes, but also like the toll that would take on to do ayahuasca, because you do it multiple times while you're there.
Yeah, 2 nights. Yeah, it's clearing. I wouldn't say it's entirely draining, but it's, sometimes I've had experiences. Actually, in all my experiences, you wake up the next day, the last thing you are is tired.
Okay. Does everybody do it at the same time, or is it like all in the same room and then you're just kind of like helping each other out? I mean, because probably some people are unable to help as much.
You kind of got your own nest. You're not really like helping each other out. You're just all sharing space and you each got your own spot, and everyone usually goes up to the altar and is served one at a time.
And then you're clear because you're mentoring or you're part of it.
Part of it, I'll say as well.
Okay. I mean, I have no idea. That's why. I'm
and
curious,
like
how that plays out.
And the shamans and the facilitators, they might take more or less, like depending on what they're feeling. It's much more in tune with it, but usually everyone is in the medicine doing the work.
You said something that really I wanted to talk about. So you said eventually brotherhood and sisterhood. Does this have something to do with the duality of spirit that you discover when you're in this process?
I believe we all have our own balance of masculinity and femininity to honor. I also believe there's a specialness of just brotherhood and just sisterhood and allowing those things to amplify together, right? A group of men like dropping into their feminine together, right, can be so transformative for that type of group and vice versa. For me, I just believe that it's an opportunity because there's community of people out there to serve and I've had expressed with me and I've had practice in facilitating for both genders and being a part of that. So
I think that's amazing. I think that's a super important thing to come to terms with and understand in our spirituality with just ourselves and accepting those dualities together.
absolutely, 100%.
So you're just starting to lead these trips now?
Yeah, so we've had I alluded to some of those other weekend retreats where that have involved mushroom and those would be ice baths, breath work, things of that nature that have happened really throughout this year and the entirety of me hosting retreats of any kind or facilitating or holding space for those things has come over the last 18 months. My first group out of the country going to Costa Rica will be a men's group the week after Thanksgiving. So coming up in a little less than 120 days or so. And yeah, that'll be our first experience together. So it's all inclusive, everything except flights that I handle for everyone in between. So all the meals, all the domestic transportation, all the medicine, all the lodging, all the everything is handled. So it's just about showing up.
It's like the most unique
Yeah.
entrepreneurship of all time to actually, I don't know, that's it's changing people's lives and I think it's a pretty cool thing to do and like again like on your journey and just finding a way to something that means a lot to you that you get to share and that's a big change like that's the coolest career. I hate my job most of the time, so I can tell you that. So yeah, kudos to you, man.
I appreciate that a lot, man. I've really tried to honor the integration and the balance of that, right? Like there are a lot of worldly sales and marketing experience, yada yada, and a lot of experience in entrepreneurship that I've gleaned over the past several years. And so I kind of have like three different phases of that, where I've got like if there's I typically aim to work with businesses at this point where I either unequivocally believe in the person that is the entrepreneur or the business owner and the mission of the business. So serving like holistic health services or spirit-led offerings, facilitators, food, those things all being a big part of that, food and water, things that are universal and true offerings to the world. So helping folks inside their business, whether like consulting on revenue-based things or working with them one-to-one about putting their roots down and filling their own cup up first and helping them build systems for that and helping them prioritize and get out of their own head, especially solopreneurs and folks that are, always trying to figure it out, just giving them that sounding board and that peace of mind to be able to help them make decisions more quickly. And then the full spirit-led side, right? It's been really incredible that I've had folks, I had a married couple in their 50s come on my last retreat that are people that quite frankly I would have walked past on the street 100 times out of 100 and
Just didn't fit that mold what you would think would want that experience.
Yeah, at all, like at first sight. And then they came through a really powerful recommendation, someone that actually had quite an experience with a ceremony that happens in Indianapolis and someone that was facilitating did not do a good job closing that and holding that space. And my friend that owned that space was out of state, and she called me and said, "Hey, this happened, and these two people got left here. Can you please go and make sure they are okay?" And I showed up, and this woman was the last person there. Even the facilitator had left her, and she was dealing with she said the deepest depths of her abandonment wounds when I knocked on the door. And I had the owner on the phone and she let me in and I just sat and made some tea and held space with her. And And she got to move through, and I made sure she was safe and good to go home. And she said, like, you were my guardian angel that day. And this woman happened to go by one of her friends, run into her at a coffee shop, and she was talking about, we'd like to try this mushroom. We've seen like how healing, like the therapeutic benefits, and we think that'd be cool to experience. She's like, funny enough, I know a guy. And they came, and it was incredible. I saw them have so many cool breakthroughs and so many experiences, and they contributed so much to the group. So much joy and love. It really humbled me to not try so hard in your mind to figure out like who you're going to serve. Even in fact, on the way up here, so my brother William that I met in Costa Rica just drove into town. And then I came back up, and on the elevator, there was this gorgeous dog. The dog's name is Costa. Their owner, that I just met this guy on the elevator before, owns land 2 miles from the town where I'm hosting the retreat.
That's amazing. What a coincidence.
And so I was late because he was getting the information for my retreat so we can talk tomorrow.
That's great, man.
I mean, it's in this world where like, like ketamine's a big thing, but people are doing that like multiple times and like through the week, and like, whether they're delivering it through the mail or like a doctor can shoot it up your nose and like sit with you. It seems like a totally different and like very, I don't know, this, it sounds like a completely different experience than what you're offering. I guess before I forget, like say I like to go to Costa Rica, like what's the best way to get a hold of you? Like, and if there's,
Yeah, because I'm sold.
Yeah.
I already told you I wanted to do this before, but I'm super sold.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share. Folks can go to my website at www.withgaiakai.com. That's with GAIAKAI. My email,
we'll have the link on the website and everything too. All your links, we'll make sure that we have all those in the website too.
Amazing. My Instagram is with Gaiakai. My email is connect@withgaiakai.com. Folks can reach out to me any of those ways. Hit up any of those links. There's connect forms. There's inquiry forms about the retreats. There's contact buttons on my site and business listing on my Instagram, all those things. So we have that. And I have a men's group online. It's a 6-week program, $33 a week starting September 1st. So that's going to be like a 6-week there. And then I'll shift into the 6-week preparation with the group coming into Costa Rica. The folks that decide to come to Costa Rica, whenever they commit, I'm going to also just fold them into the first men's group as part of that complimentary, because I want them to start swimming together as soon as possible.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really great.
And I think, I don't know if we had enough time because you got a lot to tell, but we'll have to I want to hear how this went. And like I said, if anybody wants to share, like, I appreciate you getting like deep into some of these things, but it's important to what you're doing is kind of what we want to talk about. So it just works out that way. The big question is always, and I think I alluded to, is like, from these experiences now, what do you feel? What's your feelings on like death and what we are and what happens to us?
I'm not implying I was qualified before, but I think this is the least qualified question for me to answer.
No, that's fine. No judgment, no pressures.
I think we're a spirit living in a body. I can go that far. Working hypothesis, but I would suppose there are different dimensions, different levels. There are probably higher and lower dimensions, heaven, hell, etc., that are, I believe, more vibrational states, and then energetic. And then our spirit moves into those frequencies, perhaps a bit more. I know that our brain shoots out a bunch of DMT when we pass, and that's kind of allegedly the last astral projection, so to speak.
The biggest comfort of this question for you is that because you don't have an answer prepared, it probably means you don't think about it, which is also very comforting for people in a way too, right? Like that you are comfortable enough that you're just like it's not something that crosses your mind, it seems.
So I have a sneaking, it does cross my mind some, but I think what to do with life crosses my mind a lot more than what to do with death. I know that I'm here on purpose, and I feel more and more by the day more in line, more on that path than I have. And I've learned to honor that balance of your mind, your heart, and your gut, and to listen to all of them and have them all in tune, and to know when to prioritize what. There are some folks that would say, there are some folks that would prioritize, say, you listen to your mind. The other things are just clues. And I'd say, well, you're just fucking wrong. And that's okay. To each their own. But I know what it's like to live up here all the time. That's not where I want to be. I want to be all the way here. So for me, I think that I have a sneaking suspicion, and this is where like reincarnation and all these other things and our spirits it's like, I'm not sure how it all works. I've also had the opportunity with ceremonies to communicate, or at least I believe to communicate with some of my grandparents and my ancestors that have passed. And it wasn't a lot. It was just a line or two, and it was enough to be comforted and to be seen and acknowledge how proud they were.
That's amazing.
And for me, I have a sneaking suspicion that I don't know. I don't know all the answers, but I know that I sure as fuck don't feel 27 years old in what I understand in the world. But I think it's a really beautiful blessing to embrace the duality of feeling so young in this life and feeling so ancient in other ways.
I just feel old. So yeah, and mentally I'm a child, obviously, with my reality shows.
We're just flipped.
Yeah. But see that's
Namaste.
The lesson from this is to, at 44, to be more like Kai now. Yeah, the positivity that you radiate from these experiences. And again, like I'm not supposed to. It's just an opinion. It's just curious to find out what people go through and like how again how that changes them. Like from small town Christian to like man of the world who's like blowing minds in Costa Rica and then making a difference. So I think it's a big thing. So like it's just an opinion. I don't know if anybody knows the answer, but it's cool to hear what you've taken from it. And again, if you're talking to ancestors, I think we're all going to be fine.
Yeah, I'll have to shout out the main man Jesus too, and experiencing that down there as well. It's kind of all full circle for me. There's a lot of it. I'm still trying to understand where my walk is with my faith, but I know that I have offerings and things that have moved the needle for me and my spirit and my life, and I'm just going to do my best to boldly and vulnerably continue to share those with people. And the folks that it resonates for, awesome. The folks that it doesn't, awesome. No love lost.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today. And like I said, after we'll get all your links up. I'm pointing below, like anybody can see this, or anybody knows what I'm doing. But it's over here somewhere. There's links, and then we'll get those set up. And appreciate you talking to us. And we'll find, like when you after you get your trips done, like maybe come back and hear how Costa Rica went. And see like how it's going for you.
Yeah, perhaps we can drop in fresh. I'll probably hang out there for a week or two after the retreat, kind of take some space for me to process everything. So maybe we can get some real time processing.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to have you back and dive into more detail and some other things we kind of touched in here.
Yeah,
for sure.
Go back, take some notes, and figure out like how many other questions I couldn't ask in like the time we had. So
okay, I think there's questions you asked that I didn't even answer. So
nah, you did good, man. So thanks so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, thanks for joining us, and thanks for everybody that took the time to listen. We appreciate all of you. All right, thanks, man.
All right, peace.